Morning, everybody. How are we doing today? It's a Saturday morning here in Minnesota. Got some snow on the ground out there. Bit of a winter snow glare going on. I got a squint somewhat here. I'm nearly over that chest cold. It was a bit of a doozy, just in terms of fluid buildup in the chest, but still just coughing that stuff up, but I'm feeling 99% better right now, which is good. It wasn't only about a week or so, you know. Anyway, so today I want to talk about something that's a little bit off the beaten path, perhaps, and maybe it doesn't bother people like it bothers me, but there's a difference between expertise and opinion, and I try to be careful with that line, and I try to give clear indication when something's an opinion of mine versus when something is more of a, this is the facts. You know, this is an agreed upon standard. And even those things are very relative. But I'm speaking specifically about on the Facebook groups, mine, Ken's group, and all the other jazz groups. There's dozens of them, if not hundreds. Something I see way too often is people posting a record, and either the commenter, poster, or the commenters will say, oh, this is their best record. This is the best record this label did. And I wonder how many times people can really quantify those statements. The one that triggered me the other day was this guy was posting a Sonny Stitt record, and someone's like, oh, I think his best record is this one. And I had no problem ever with someone saying my favorite Sonny Stitt is this one. But to say the best Sonny Stitt is this one, have you heard all 85 of his records? That's the question I always gotta ask. I'm like, somebody's got such amazing, massive bodies of work, and to say with such confidence that this is his best record, and I've seen it in the context of a record label too. Oh, this is the best Blue Note. I think it's the best one. You know what I mean? To say it's my favorite, that's I think how it should be worded. And I don't think you should say that this is the best Impulse or the best Prestige or the best Candid unless you have a fairly good scope of that landscape. If I said this is the best piece of farmland anywhere in this county, but I've only seen 2 pieces of farmland, that's a shitty recommendation on my part. And I think it's just a simple verbiage thing. I think most people mean this is my favorite, but it needs to be said in that context because it's an opinion which isn't challengeable. Okay, it's your favorite. That's a great thing. But if you're saying it's the best that this label did or that this artist did, what percentage of that artist's work or that label's work do you need to have to quantify that statement? And that's a question I want people to answer in the comments. In order for you to say that this is the best Impulse, how many Impulse do you need to have? And my channel, I don't make a lot of best comments. I try to describe the context it's in. I describe whether or not most people should enjoy it, or most people will kind of shy away from it. But that's not saying it's good or bad. I'm not saying this is the best or the worst. Best is a very difficult thing to say. And there's all kinds of, and I have the whole Blue Note catalog, but it's very tough for me having all of it to just say, oh, this is the best one. It's much easier when you have 4 of them to be like, oh, that's the best Blue Note. And it's just something that always kind of bugs me when I see these comments, or even the poster who maybe does it himself. It's like, if you're going to make a comment about Sonny Stitt's body of work, you better have more than 4 Sonny Stitt records. Or else you're really kind of just ignorant, or else you're just repeating what you've read elsewhere, and therefore you should say that. From what I've read, this is his best. I can live with that. From what I've read, from the reviews I've seen, who suppose these experts have the bodies of work, this is his best record. But when someone says, oh, I think this is his best record, and in a lot of cases, I know how much some of these guys are beginners. I know how much some of these guys are, how small their collections are in a relative sense. And so I'm sure it doesn't bother most people. But as someone who has complete bodies of work of most of these artists, when I read these comments, often I get my back up. I'm like, you think that's the best record that they did? And how many have you heard? I have a lot of them, and I couldn't make that statement. I have all this person's work, and I certainly couldn't say what their best record was, let alone easily say, oh, that's that one, no question. So I wonder how people can throw that out there so candidly. And maybe it's not that important, but again, I just think people should say, this is my favorite. This is what I like the best. I think you'll like it. Keep it as that. You know, because when you start saying this is the best, suddenly you're going from an opinion to trying to state facts. And how qualified are you to make those facts? Because I know myself, as a person who has complete bodies of work of a lot of these labels, a lot of these artists, making such a broad, simple statement, I can't do it from my position. So I'm often just in shock going, really? You think that's their... Have you heard this? Have you heard that? Have you heard this? Have you heard that? It just makes my skin crawl sometimes. Maybe it's just me. Does anybody else notice this or is bothered by it? Maybe you have to have 60 records by an artist to be bothered by someone with 3 having opinions about it. Or not even opinions, stating facts about it. Maybe that's what it takes. Maybe it takes someone else kind of with that massive oversight to see someone with a smaller perspective making broad, sweeping statements. So, again, what percentage of an artist or a label should someone have to be able to make factual, contextual statements about it that have any validity whatsoever? And like I said, Quantify was saying, this is what I've read, this is what I've been told. Consensus seems to be that this is his best. I'm okay with all that. I'm like I said, I've never have a problem with anyone saying, even if I hate the record, if they say this is my favorite record, that's fine. You know, I have no problem with someone saying what their favorite is, because they're entitled to have that opinion, no matter if I agree with it or not. But to factually say that something is someone's best just takes a lot of balls. I think it's making a big assumption that even though I've not heard 90% of this artist's work, you know, anyway. I want to talk to you about a couple of fun records today. First of all, what we're listening to is a Japanese reissue of a record on VJ that was called Wynton Kelly. I think it's just called that with the colorful letters. I should have pulled it out and showed it to you because I have both versions, but I didn't realize when I bought this it was actually the same as that. I'm not one who often just buys both versions for no reason. I thought I was getting a cool Wynton Kelly Japanese release only kind of thing when I bought this. And of course, it's just a reissue of one of his VJs. Much better cover than the VJ version, absolutely. Sounds great. I think it's just kind of in a trio setting with Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb, and Sam Jones appears on some of it. And of course, Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb, and Wynton Kelly all exited Miles Davis' group at the same time and operated as a trio for the next 7-8 years in the 60s as one of the premier trios in jazz. And they back some people, but they perform a lot as a unit. They don't record as much as they probably should have, but all 3 are fantastic players, high pedigree guys. And it's interesting that they all left Miles at the same time, all kind of had enough of that dog and pony show. And they made their money when they could, and the 3 of them moved on together as a unit. And they're really a wonderful dialogue-filled trio. They have a nice intercourse with each other, and I enjoy their exchange. And the version of Autumn Leaves here is wonderful. It's probably not something else Cannonball utterly wonderful, but it's wonderful stuff all the same. And I'm a huge Wynton Kelly guy. In a pinch, someone asked me, my favorite jazz artist? Rod Garland's a name that I would my cat Henry feels the need to knock anything off whenever they get the chance, even if it's made of glass. He's kind of a prick that way, but he was a street cat that we adopted, and he kind of has his own way of doing things. So you gotta love him. Cats are cats. But so yeah, the Wynton Kelly record's fantastic, and he's one of my go-to guys when I have to listen to jazz on YouTube or when I have to stream something. And I've become very disenfranchised with that. I find most of the streaming options very limited. Pandora will often have a Grant Green playlist. Will have the same 25 songs, and I'm not messing with them or like thumbs up or nothing. I'm not changing them much. I just think to myself, well, it's a huge body of work of jazz. They should be able to create great playlists, and I found them to be very limited. And YouTube as well. It's like you can find some stuff on there, but when I'm busy doing something and I put YouTube on, it'll play that first thing I wanted, and then it'll just loop back to popular stuff that I've heard of. It's like, come on, man, dig deeper. And making the trading cards upstairs, the fronts, I kind of had to be up there for that process because I needed the space to lay stuff out on the desk and all that. And now that I'm doing the backs, I can be down here, which is why I get to listen to more records. And boy, the satisfaction of playing the vinyl and being here, listening to the warmth of the record, and this is the relationship you have with the music, playing it on the vinyl versus just streaming or YouTube. It's not the same. This is so much more fun, so much more interactive. I have such a greater comprehension of who I'm listening to, and it gets to match my mood because I'm picking it out. I just find the other process is very, very disappointing. And you can find a lot of stuff on YouTube, but there's a lot of stuff you can't find, if I'm honest. This is Henry. He's all black. He's a little bit naughty. Does his own little thing. But you've never seen a happier cat to be inside. Being outside in the wintertime in Minnesota is no fun. And our husky, actually, believe it or not, found the cat underneath our back porch last New Year's Day. So she saw the cat jump under there and kind of went and my wife fished Henry out, brought him inside, fed him, and the guy ate like he hadn't ate in a couple days, if not weeks. And he's the most appreciative cat I've ever had. He loves us so much. He's a fun guy. He's a bit of a clown. He's gotten kind of fat, and he's gotten a little clumsy with his fatness. But he's Henry. He likes to pip things around. Pip, pip, pip. He goes on my wife's bookshelf where she has some stuff, and he'll just sit there knocking stuff off. I'm like, mother, what are you doing? But anyway, it's a cat. This is one of the coolest records that a lot of people don't know about, by one of the coolest artists that a lot of people don't know much about. And for all the talk about Monk and Mingus and Miles' second quintet and all the modernity of post-bop going into the avant-garde, all those edges and sounds and diminished minors and just all the different aspects that kind of create where jazz goes, 1963, 64, 65, 66. Here we have the great George Russell. And I think this record is 1959, 58, on Decca, where he makes 3 great records. Here he is really kind of being a forebearer of some of that modernity. And he has a number of records in 57, 58, 56 even, where he's already starting to establish some of his concepts of sound and different time scale, key signatures. And of course the modal ideology is a George Russell creation. If you'll see, Bill Evans is featured here with George Russell. And Bill Evans was a very obscure name before Miles Davis. His first record on Riverside, I've read, sold under 200 copies in the first year. So he was nobody. He comes up through New Jersey, has a very troubled childhood, Evans, and he's friends with guys like Tony Scott and Mundell Lowe, and they do little groups together, and he's kind of finding his way. And then working with George Russell has a big impact on Bill Evans. And Evans has a music education, so he's able to process the mathematics behind what George Russell's doing, which is a lot of why Miles Davis brings him into that what became a sextet. So the idea that Miles and modal was his innovation, again, is on its face ridiculous. It's an innovation George Russell wrote a book about, used Bill Evans to help make it happen, and then Miles Davis signs Bill Evans away to make it happen for him. How do we give Miles Davis the credit for that? He's one of the great thieves in the history of music, and I think it's probably not his own doing. It's probably just that legacy of that big name and the labels, and he helps bring fame to these new innovations. And so Columbia just writes it as a Miles Davis innovation because he brought it to the people. And so I don't think it's really Miles Davis all the time that's professing to be the birth of the cool, the father of modal, the beginner of fusion. I think it's the writers and critics who don't always know their history even. And obviously most of the other names have slipped into obscurity. So more and more gets saddled onto Miles' back. And this is just one of those clear indicators of that's not the case. And if you listen to this record, you will hear some sounds of Mingus, some sounds of Monk, and you will actually hear in George Russell's late 50s work some of the second Miles quintet sounds, production, arrangement, some of the edges, some of the tension. It's really funny when listening to this yesterday with my current set of ears, just how this kind of predates and sets the table for a lot of what's to come in jazz in the next decade. George Russell's really an important figure, and Russell continues to make work at Riverside even after Evans leaves. That's very trend-setting and cutting edge and filled with incredible minimalism and then explosive dynamics and a lot of different edges and conflicting tonalities. He's a very clever arranger, and he's one of the most unheralded people of this era. And I listened to this record twice, and I hadn't heard it probably in a year, and I've listened to it probably a total of 10 times over the last 5-6 years. It's really a great piece. It's got a fun cover from that era, the space age going on. I like the cover, honestly. It's dated for sure, but it is what it is, and it fills a wonderful stepping stone in the ladder that is the jazz transition. He's a big piece of that, and he needs to be recognized. So check out those early George Russell records. There's one on RCA, very, very good stuff. I think there's 3, maybe 4 on Decca, and those come out in that separate Decca sequence, the 9200 jazz sequence. And there's a whole nother sequence at Decca. I think it's 4,000 or 8. I can't remember, but it runs, with jazz titles in it. But then they started this 9200 sequence for kind of more edgy jazz, and it's a very interesting time by a very large innovator, without any question. So the next record I want to talk to you about is right here. Hold on a second. That was my wife, and she locked her car keys in her car. I got an hour and a half to get there so I can finish making this episode at least. So George Russell's a guy who I think deserves way more recognition than he gets. Someone that you should all check out if you don't know. And like I said, his Riverside work is fantastic, and he continues making really modern, interesting stuff. I believe into the 70s, if not longer. He's a clever fella. And again, that connection with Evans to Miles, with the modal connection, it's pretty cut and dry, that history. But this, we're going to talk about a couple of Regent records. And Regent's a label that's a sister of Savoy. Lubinsky and Savoy buys Regent in the late 40s, if I remember. So still in the 78 era. And when he first buys up Regent, he doesn't graft it into the Savoy family. He just kind of allows them to keep operating independently, but it's now under his, jacket. And eventually, as the LP era dawns in '55, he puts a more of a hands-on approach on Regent, It starts to make Regent kind of a sister label to Savoy. And that means there's some actually really great jazz titles on Regent in that 6000 series. And it's a mixed bag. You know, there's some weird stuff in there, some folk, accordion kind of stuff, gospel stuff, classical stuff. But there's some really cool jazz titles mixed in. And I would say over half of it is jazz. Some of it's really anonymous stuff, like something Duke, organ player that I've never heard of. I can't find no information on, but it's kind of a cool record, you know. But there's also really cool stuff like what we're listening to right now. And this is Curtis Fuller. Where did I put the jacket? Oh, right there. It's magic. It's a cool album cover. She's doing her thing. And if you look at the lineup, you have the great Sonny Red, Curtis Fuller, Tommy Flanagan, George Tucker, and Lewis Hayes. And I've kind of had this fun thing now where I'm like, how many guys on this record did I make a card for? All 5 of those guys. So if you have all 5 guys in the cards, to me that tells you that's going to be a pretty solid record. You know, or my trading card says pretty extensive. One of the two things. But speaking of the trading cards, I am now launched firmly into making the backs of them. I've finished the front sides. I do have to make some edits to the front sides as I go forward, making the backs, just for printing purposes. We had a page test printed yesterday at a printing shop in town. We're still debating how we're going to get copies of the sets to people. You know, they're not going to be charged. What we think we might do, he's looking into seeing if he can print them and ship them, but that's not really their specialty. So maybe they'll print them and then I'll ship them for them. Or the other possibility is this. I might just send you a flash drive with the entire set on there, ready to print, and you can take it to a place locally, and they'll print it for the same relative price as these guys will. It's not like these guys are giving me some kind of sweetheart deal. It's 77 pages on a 100-point cardstock or whatever. You know, he'll put all those specs in there, and then I can mail you that flash drive for a few bucks, and then you can go to your local printer and find someone who'll print all of them, all 77 pages, for 60, 70 bucks. There won't be any setup at the printing shop like there would be for me and my set. There's setup costs and my cost. But once it's all just ready to go, he's saying that you can take that flash drive to any print shop, say this is the kind of card we want, this is how we want it, kind of need it cut, and he thinks that they'll do it for 50, 60 bucks because there's no setup. And then you also won't have to deal with any shipping costs. There'll be no hassle for me. And being a teaching tool, which these are, you know, promo teaching tool, I'm not making money on these. I think this might be the best way to go, but we're still feeling our way through it. But making these backs is taking some time. Putting these little bios together and recommended records. It's I've worked most of the kinks out. I've got it down to where it's actually going smoothly. But I've only done 35 of the backs on a 608.93. So it's going to take me probably a month to do all the backs. And initially when we were talking about doing this set, I was talking about doing, you know, releasing a few pages at a time for you guys to download. But now we're doing it so that you can get the whole set at once, which means I have to finish all of them before we can do it. So time's going to allow me to get it done, you know, but it's a little more time consuming. And I've already put a couple hundred hours in easily, you know, but it's a labor of love. I enjoy it. I can't wait to have my set, you know, to flip through it and to organize it by city and to organize it by genre and organize it by, you know, all kinds of instrument. That's what I really want to do. Put a big pile of trumpet players together, big pile of piano players together. And there's even a fun concept I have of where we can play a kind of a trading card game where you have 3 guys, you dish out 6 cards. You can discard 2, pick 2 more up. Discard 1 more, pick 1 more card up. And then you put your cards down and we see who has the best group left. You know, and you need a piano player, drummer, and a bass player, hopefully. So maybe you play a few rounds. And then who has the best band? And if someone ends up with 3 bass players and a trumpet, that guy lost, you know. But if someone ends up with a drummer, a piano player, a trombone player, a bass player, and a trumpet player, that's an interesting group. And so I could see little ways we could play fun little trading card games with these cards, actually, a kind of jazz poker, if you will. But that's my childish mind kind of still going, oh, okay, with my baseball, my hockey cards, and make the best lineups I can. You know, I'm gonna put this guy in the wing and this guy. But that's, you can see how childishly excited I kind of am about it. And the guys at the print shop were really impressed by the set. They really were. Like, this is really a cool idea, really nicely presented. The information's really impressive. And they didn't have to give me any of those compliments. You know, they volunteered those. And I think they're even kind of enjoying working on this project, in part because it's more interesting than the average office work that they do for people, you know. But anyway, so this is a really cool record. They do Hank Mobley's Soul Station. Fuller and Red are a fantastic little dynamic duo. And then the great rhythm section with Hayes, Flanagan, and Tucker. It's, again, a cool record on Regent. Think of it as a Savoy, essentially. But quite an attractive woman, though. I don't know why she's wrapped up in a sheet like that. But tough record to find, I'll be honest. And it's going to cost you probably near $100. Has this been reissued? I don't know. There's a lot of Savoys that haven't, and Regents even probably fewer. This next one I know has been reissued. Jazz Eyes on Regent 6056. And if you get to know Regent at all, this is 6055. It's in that era of the 6000 sequence where they make a great string of records. Probably about 6040, they start making some really great titles. And from 6040 to about 6075, there's 25, 30 titles in there that are really, really solid jazz records. A lot of them are very obscure, very hard to find, but they're great. You know, it's really solid, modern jazz from that era, 57, 58. It's as good as anything on Savoy at that point. Good as was on Prestige at that point. Anyway, this is the Jazz Eyes record. And I posted this on Facebook the other day, and everyone's like, who's the singer? And she's just a gal. It's John Jenkins, the fantastic player, Donald Byrd, who we all love, Don Byrd. This is before he signs with Blue Note, actually. Curtis Fuller, once again, with Tommy Flanagan, Doug Watkins, and Art Taylor. And so, again, you see how guys like Flanagan, Dougie Watkins, Arthur Taylor, those type of guys will show up on Transition, they'll show up on Blue Note, they'll show up at Prestige, they'll show up at Riverside, they'll show up on Verve, they'll show up on Regent and Savoy. A lot of those rhythm guys were just hired guns, and they played on all the labels. And one of the important things about my trading card series is to highlight some of these great sidemen who don't get the releases under their name, and so they're more under the surface in terms of their fame, but they definitely deserve recognition. So great stuff on Regent. Regent has the cool green label. And I think they're red if they're stereo, but I don't honestly see a lot of Regent stereo. Most of what I've stumbled across on Regent has been the mono earlier stuff. Doesn't seem to be that they made a lot of stereo copies. So that's today's episode, okay? We're just gonna leave it at that. What percentage of an artist or a label do you need to have an opinion calling this the best? What do you guys think? And do you guys love George Russell? Do you know George Russell? And then how much you guys know Regent? It's a small, you know, unheralded name with some great titles. As always, appreciate all you Patreon supporters. If you want to become a Patreon supporter, there's a link below. And, you know, pledge for $4 or $5 a month. It helps out with my bottom line. I'm still looking for work as a DJ. I'll find it. I'm talking to somebody in the city, but when you're a restaurateur, the number of fires you put out every week is, you know, you're always occupied with something. So while I'm sitting here waiting for him to respond and get back to me and negotiate, he's got to run a restaurant all week long. So there's probably a lot of days where he doesn't even think about me. And I understand that. Running a restaurant sucks. It's tough. And so, plus he's got kids and all that other shit. If I don't have an answer from him by New Year's, after I play there on New Year's, I'm going to look for a different thing, and we'll see where that leads me. The shitty thing is if I have to find something more 9 to 5, my back isn't going to really appreciate that at all. My back struggles when I DJ a lot. And then, of course, it's going to really impact my time to make episodes and to respond to people, but we'll figure it out. I think on my next episode, we're going to talk about this wonderful new release of the wonderful Arthur Blakey. I've listened to it once. I wanted to listen to it at least one more time before I made an episode on it. I think that's important and it's deserving of that. What a great group. And I'm looking forward to diving into it a little bit deeper and then sharing my thoughts with you guys on it. Y'all have a great day. Stay safe. Peace and love.